Welcome to another Inclusive Hallam podcast with me, Sam Coulby. I'm joined today by Jaira Warner, who is one of the co-chairs for SPARK, which is the Staff Disability Network. Jaira uses they and them pronouns. Jaira, why did you first become a co-chair of SPARK?
Well, thank you for having me, Sam. My journey to becoming a co-chair started with my own diagnoses of disabilities. So I live with complex PTSD, ADHD, and dissociative identity disorder. It's been a journey, and we'll definitely talk about that more, but one of the real big impetuses for joining SPARK was my work experience back in the U.S. If the accent hasn't given it away, yes, I'm from the U.S. And the working conditions are very different, and I experienced discrimination that led to getting fired from a job for having a PTSD episode. And I had to go to court to challenge it, and it was just this really horrendous process that made me realize, even though there are worker protections and laws that protect people with disabilities, that doesn't mean that there's not still discrimination. And having experienced that discrimination and how it took me out of work for some time, when I came to Hallam and saw that SPARK was a staff network, I realized that was a really good opportunity for me to give back and to help make it so that people don't experience that discrimination. They don't have to be faced with that really horrible situation.
Okay, and was it those experiences that sort of led you to, I understand you've been involved in a mental health non-profit that you were involved in previously?
Yeah, so I, back in the U.S., ran Creating Survivors, which was a mental health and suicide prevention nonprofit. I started it when I was 19 and ran it for about 9 years. We were working specifically in higher education and getting mental health services and counseling services more accessible for students. Having had that experience, I realized I in my day job, which is access development for student recruitment and admissions, I wanted to do a little bit of volunteering. I wanted to do a little bit of extra work. And SPARK has been a really great opportunity for me to be able to strategize and plan out my own project, my own initiatives and goals with the other co-chairs. So it was really this opportunity to utilize the experience I had back in the U.S. running my nonprofit and apply it to Hallam, which has been a wonderful home for me.
Okay, and you started to talk a bit about your experience at Hallam in terms of disability and inclusion, but can you just sort of tell us a bit more about your experience?
Yeah, so I have worked in 2 different roles for Hallam since starting, and I've had 2 different line managers who have both been really great around making sure that I'm able to voice my needs for my disability and get reasonable adjustments. I've also had a really good relationship with my current line manager, who has helped me understand that I don't always need to be 100%. It's okay to be in a dip. It's okay to not be full on everything, all pistons firing on, at the same time. It's okay to come into work and being like, you know what, today is not the best day. I'm still going to get through my stuff that I need to, but it's okay that I'm not 100% today. So that's been a really good lesson that I've learned from my line manager, and that kind of empowerment that she's given me. I would also say, on the topic of inclusion, so my gender identity is non-binary, and part of that is related to my dissociative identity disorder disability. And the thing that I've found here at Hallam has been so empowering is just people using my preferred name, Jaira, and using they, them pronouns. It has been so empowering just to be seen by everybody and be able to live my authentic life at work. It's been hugely important, but it's also helped me to feel more comfortable about being visible around my disability as well, and recognizing that what I've experienced is what I want everyone else to be able to experience, that empowerment, that welcome, that inclusion. And so it's part of my role now as SPARK, is making sure that that's the experience for all staff as well.
Okay, and you sort of, you might have heard a previous podcast we did with Avery Hubbard, who's a colleague, who talked about their experience in terms of their manager support, and you sort of touched on that now. But I appreciate that not everyone's experience, I guess, might be the same in terms of the support they get from their manager. I mean, Avery had a really positive experience. It sounds like you have as well. But what do you think sort of behind the sense that there perhaps isn't necessarily consistency across the board in terms of people's experience with their manager's support?
Yeah, I would definitely recognize, and especially as co-chair of SPARK, I have heard many stories from staff that they don't get the support from their line managers. The line managers aren't aware of what the support might be, or about having conversations around disability. I'm very fortunate to have the situations that I've had, and as Avery spoke about their line manager, there are good line managers, there are great line managers, but we like to call it the line manager lottery, because it's not a definite that you're going to get someone that's as aware as on disability or gender identity or whatever kind of aspect of identity that you need support on. And I think a lot of that comes down to just a lack of knowledge. When you don't have knowledge, you feel uncomfortable about a situation and talking about a situation, so you don't tend to broach that topic with staff. The biggest thing that I would say is that Spark is a network not just for people with disabilities and long-term health conditions. Spark is also a network for line managers who want to become more aware of what disability needs are and what's going on in the disability space. So there's definitely that role for allyship, and getting involved in Spark is definitely a good idea to do if you do manage someone who has disabilities, just so that you can be able to get the knowledge to support them as they need it. I think it also other kind of developments that we're working on it with Spark and with HROD. We've been doing some consultation work on disability awareness training, and hopefully that's rolled out in the near future. But we are currently consulting on and giving feedback on the training that's being developed. So hopefully there's some positive actions that's coming out from HROD in the near term.
Okay, so something to come then. Something which I've been really interested in recently around, and we've touched on this in Inclusive Hallam events and podcasts before, around hidden disabilities. I guess an interesting sort of dimension for me is that, I think when I was growing up, I assumed, you have a disability or you don't have a disability. And actually, I think from talking to you in your experience, I think something that sort of you've perhaps diagnosed with at a later age. So just interested in hear about your journey in terms of your own disability.
Yeah, so I was first diagnosed when I was 19, and the diagnosis wasn't a great fit. It was a condition I don't necessarily identify with, but do experience aspects of it. Ultimately, the journey came to a diagnosis of complex PTSD, which covers overarching other diagnoses I had got along the way. But when I got that first diagnosis when I was 19, I was so scared. I thought my life was coming to an end. There were career aspects that I thought I might want to pursue, and with a mental health disability, wouldn't be eligible for anymore. So it really was this scary and bleak time. But what my journey has taught me is that after I got to a point where I learned how to manage my disability, so after I got to a point where medications were all found right, and my learned behaviors were able to better adapt to my disability, I found that my disability doesn't define me, it doesn't limit me. One of the things that I really appreciate about my disability is having ADHD, being neurodivergent, and I just think differently. So I come to problems and I come to issues with a different perspective that people might not naturally think through. And that kind of neurodivergency, that thinking differently, has given me kind of a tool to be a valuable player in the teams that I work with. The other kind of the other condition that I have only recently started to understand more and come to terms with is the dissociative identity disorder. And for my experience, not a lot of people know what that is.
It's not something I've heard of before.
Yeah, it's been a rebranded, kind of relabeled or renamed condition. But basically, it's a situation in which identities can compartmentalize within one single person. So I, for myself, experienced two different identities. One is a female that I call Jaira, and one is a male that I call Jay. And at different times, either of them can be fronting or be in the dominant of what I'm expressing. It's one of those conditions that it sounds scary, and it's a very different kind of condition. But for me, what I've learned from it is that each identity shows up when I need them to. What this is I experienced extreme trauma as a child and in early adulthood, and my brain and my psyche had to survive that situation, and this is kind of what happened. But that means that when things are really getting tough, and one dominant is needing to take a rest, the other one usually will come in and be able to work together as a team to make sure that the overall person is fully able to do everything that I need to do. So I look at it as a team a team building kind of exercise within my own self, and that's been really empowering. It's been something that has helped me transition my thinking when interacting with others. If I come to every interaction thinking I want to work with this person as a teammate, it's a lot different than if I came to this to people and said, okay, you're someone different, and I have what I want to get done. But for me, I'm always coming to perspectives of working with other people as teammates, because my own identity and my gender identity encompasses a team.
Can you tell us a bit more about your conditions and sort of what you've learned about these through your experience over the years?
Definitely. I would say that, from a starting point, complex PTSD and dissociative identity disorder, or DID, are very misunderstood and invisible kind of conditions that people aren't familiar with. I've luckily found that there's a natural curiosity from people wanting to know more, and if there's that openness from me that is willing to share, that is reciprocated with an openness for wanting to learn. So I found that it's been a really great opportunity to raise awareness for these disabilities when I speak to people about them, and that's just kind of who I am, wanting to be a role model for a role model or a piece of support or a person of support for any type of condition that I experience, for others that might experience it. But I've really found that natural curiosity to be a positive, because it gives that opportunity to raise awareness. I will say, though, that it can be something that is very scary to think about and to disclose. With conditions that aren't understood very well, there is that anxiety and fear sometimes that, someone's going to perceive me differently because I have this condition. But what I've really learned over the years is that I put in the hard work to get to a place of self-love and acceptance, and I really do love myself now. And part of that love has been realizing that, yes, there are parts of me that are changed by my experiences, that are traditionally looked at as impairments, but actually these are parts of myself that I love, because they're what got me through my life. They're the survival mechanisms that or adaptations that I've used to get to this point. And I'm now at a point in my life where I'm truly thriving, and having that self-love, I just lean into it when I get scared or anxious or nervous, and that's been the kind of the biggest positive from this whole experience with having disabilities and living with disabilities, is they've helped me come to love myself even more. I would say the other kind of thing that I've realized is that trauma is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. We live in, we've lived through a global pandemic in which everyone was experiencing a form of trauma, and it's one of those things that you think that if you experience this trauma and it's going to be a lifelong kind of thing. I mean, yes, complex PTSD and PTSD, dissociative identity disorder, all of these conditions are lifelong conditions, but it's one of those things that your childhood is not a life sentence. So what I experienced in my childhood would have never set me up to have the life that I have now. It's from getting the help to getting the treatment, getting the care. All of these things have gotten me to the point that I am thriving in my life, and I don't have to look back on what was baggage for so many years, and now I can just look forward on what is positive.
Okay, and touching on the positive and moving forward, and you talked there about supporting others. I think in your role as co-chair of Spark, I'm sure that's something that you're absolutely doing. I mean, the networks, I think, are doing fantastic work, and especially Spark. I've done lots of work with Spark before. Can you just tell us a bit about what Spark's doing and sort of how Spark benefits the university, I guess?
Definitely. Well, thank you for the compliments on Spark and what we've been doing. The first thing that we're trying to do is raise visibility for disability. This is, things like speaking on this podcast and writing blogs that go out to staff-wide communications. These are all things that we're doing. We have Disability History Month coming up in November and December, and we'll have a lot of content coming out for that. But we're trying to raise visibility of people with disabilities and all types of disabilities specifically. We're also doing a lot in community engagement. When I came onto the network, there wasn't as much community engagement, and I realized that what we really wanted was to create a thriving community of people that could relate to each other and find some kindred spirits and be able to support each other. So we've started to implement network meetings, which are for the network-wide membership, to get more information on what's going on with Spark. We're also launching this month our Teams channel, and this is a space for that community building, for people to come together and share best tips and practices, but also to get support when they need it. We're also instituting welcome and gather sessions. These are less formal sessions, just run every other month to get people to onboard it onto the network, to feel like they're able to know what the network is and who they can go to for support, whether it's a complaint or getting advice, knowing what the team at Spark is, or who the team at Spark is, and being able to get that support. And then the last thing on engagement is we're just starting to institute listening sessions, and these are our staff-wide events that we're looking to just hear from staff experience. As a co-chair, I sit on the disability steering group, and I am asked to represent the lived experience of Hallam staff. And these type of events, especially the listening event, is that opportunity for me to hear from staff-wide what are the actual lived experiences and what are things that still need improvements and still need reworking, so that I can be better informed when I go to the disability steering group. We also do consult with the disability steering group quite a bit. We've helped consult on a number of policy changes, including gender neutral and disabled toilets. But the big one that we've really done a lot of work with, and that's coming to fruition right now, is the disability passport. There were multiple documents before that staff could use to log a disability, get reasonable adjustments, and plan again, adjustments and modifications to their working conditions to be able to have equitable working conditions. It was pretty confusing with multiple documents, and what we've done is we've helped consult in HROD, consolidating all of those documents and that information into one disability passport. And this is a document that you can go from one role to the next within Hallam, and it can keep those equitable working conditions in place for you, no matter where you move within Hallam. We recognize it's not the perfect model, or it's not the perfect solution. It is, however, that we've seen in the feedback we've gotten that it is really useful for a number of staff for a number of reasons. So we highly support people that want to explore having those conversations with their line managers to use the disability passport. But it's not the ultimate end all be all, and that's because there's a difference in how Spark looks at disability and how culturally in society we look at disability. So Spark comes to disability from the social model, and what that means is that the disability is not the impairment. The societal and cultural norms and structures and infrastructure is what causes an impairment or a condition in which things are not equitable. And so what we're trying to do is change societal norms and change societal practice so that people are able to access work or any kind of facility, building, or situation in which their needs are met for their specific needs, and not just keeping in place what is there because it's a societal norm. The disability passport more looks at disability from a medical model, and so there is a prescriptive kind of nature to it, and that's part of the process of just where things are at right now. We're working to get that social model to be more in place, and there's more work coming down the road for that. But it's really looking at changing how we as a society view disability.
It's been really interesting discussing that with you all today. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.